We have teachers from a lot of school districts here. We're so happy that you're here and you've come to join us. And we truly hope you join us tomorrow at the Hudson Children's Book Festival too. But it's a privilege and an honor for me to introduce the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, Mr. Walter D. Myers.
With his medal. So what I thought I would do is I'll talk you through one book that I've done, and then we'll just open the floor for questions. Is there any book you would like me to do? No?
Doesn't matter.
No, any of them.
Okay. I did a book. It's just being published now. It's called All the Right Stuff. And one of the things that I see is that a lot of the young people are not getting the kinds of information they need to even survive. That they're not getting kinds of information. And the information that I got from the dinner table, around the dinner table, they're not getting. And they're getting misinformation from the community. Now, a kid's education begins when he wakes up in the morning, and it continues throughout the day. So when a kid comes downstairs, perhaps he's had breakfast, perhaps not, he is saying to himself, well, okay, the good life is not for me. And very often when he walks through his neighborhood, he is saying, he sees people who look like him and live with him, and they're not doing well. Very often I feel that they're saying that, okay, what my teachers are telling me is good for some people, but not good for me. And although they may not have the language to say this is what they believe. So when you ask a kid, what do you want to do with your life? He says he wants to be a rapper. You say, that's not going to happen. And he knows it too. Or he wants to be in the NBA. He knows he's not going to go in. You know, kid doesn't even make the JV team, but he's going to be he knows it's not going to happen, but he has to say something. And so many of these kids are convinced that their lives are not going to work. And so all the things that we advise them to do, they won't do it. You know, and they just will not do those things. As National Ambassador, what I hope to do is to get them look at reading in a different way. I don't want to ever to say to a kid that a book can take you to far off places, a book can give you adventures, because kids are saying, that sounds as if it's a nice adjunct to my life. I'm not interested in that adjunct. And that's for somebody else. And that's a problem. One of the things that I do know is that for many, many young people, books are simply an opportunity to fail. Here, I'm going to read this book, someone's going to ask me about it, and I'm not going to have the right answer, and I'm going to fail. I would like to get a great book series for reluctant readers in which they could get credit for reading the books, but not necessarily grades. How is this going to work? It can work because it works in some colleges. In New York State, you have Empire State College. Empire State College, what you have to do is to indicate that you've learned something, and you can get credit for that learning with books. and kids. I'm thinking about it, you know. As national ambassador, since the beginning of the year, I've been yakking away and giving interviews about reading. I recognize two problems. The first problem is that kids begin schools at varying levels of competence. Some kids begin school with a vocabulary of 3,500 words, while others begin with a vocabulary of 12,000 to 15,000 words. And Dr. Leslie Morrow at Rutgers suggests that only 15% of the kids close that gap. Now that is, why does the gap exist? The gap exists for one reason, because of the loss of vocabulary in the workplace. You know, when you go home, and if you have children or small kids around you, what they hear most often is the language of the workplace, the language of your colleagues. They hear the language of your interests. And you know, right now I'm being tortured by having my kitchen redone. I got these 3 guys come in who are redoing my kitchen. It's torture. It's just torture. I mean, it's really. They took the first thing they did was to take out the sink, and they haven't replaced it in a week and a half. You know, so to go upstairs to get water, downstairs to get water, it's torturing me. You know, that's why I left and came up here. No. But what happens when I hear their vocabularies, and they're talking about different screws, different joints, different. It cost me $1,000 yesterday. Backsplash. It's getting. They were going to put something on the wall. My wife changed her mind, and she wants a granite backsplash. I don't even know what a backsplash is. You know, I thought, you know, at first I thought she was saying back rub. You know, for $1,000. But anyway, but the vocabulary is so rich. It's so rich. Wednesday we went to the doctor. She had her knee replaced. And the doctor was talking about, you know, the mobility in the knee and the lateral movement and the again, the vocabulary is so rich. When you have kids who are from households which are in the second and third generation of either greatly underemployed or unemployed, you have language poverty. And language poverty is worse on the kids than, from a reading standpoint, than economic poverty. You're getting the same thing in northern London. Now you have those riots in northern London. You go to northern London, they have what they call council housing, which is projects. So I'm recognizing that, and I'm trying to encourage people to go into the urban areas and teach grandmothers and young mothers and young fathers to read to the children from the ages of 3 months on. Give them 3 month break, but after that, they read to the little guys. And especially with the dialogic reading, where you try to involve the child in the process. And there's some wonderful books out there. I saw just a magnificent book someone sent me. People have been sending me books like, oh my God. Now, someone sent a book, Who Needs to Be Tucked In? I said, all the book, that's it. And you turn the page, and then there's a baby bear that needs to be tucked in. The next one is a baby, and it's such an adorable, and I can see any little kid go into that book. I've had some terrible books sent to me, too. Someone sent me a book, imagine your head was a golf ball. Imagine your head was a hammer. Who wants a child to think of their head as a hammer or a golf ball? I mean, please. But when I approach organizations about this, teaching dialogic reading, this interactive reading process, they say to me, do you think that urban moms will do this? And do you think that these people really care enough to spend the time doing it? Yeah, they do.
Yes.
They do. They do if they're taught how to do it and what they're doing. How to do it and what they're doing. In the RIF program in California, there were Latina mothers who were taught this, and they were so grateful for the opportunity to even being told you have something to give to your child. You know, a guy who can't afford to buy his son Air Jordans can spend some time reading. With older kids, which is the second thing, these older kids are convinced that they're going to be failures. What I look for is to try to bring books which celebrate their lives. One of the things that people don't realize that many books exclude poor kids. It's like the golden age of literature and of English literature. None of the books included poor kids unless they were secretly a princess. Like A Little Princess by, was it Burnett?
Burnett.
Yeah, right. That was initially published as Adventures of Sarah Crewe or something like that. But all of these poor English and Irish kids were left out of the books. So what I do is I'm looking back at my life. You know, I'm 74 years old. How did that ever happen? I mean, one day I was like 37 and 38, and the next day 74. What a shock.
What a blessing.
I never expected. So I'm at a point in my life where I'm looking back anyway, you know, finishing sentences and summing up stuff. And I wondered how I got to be where I was, and I think it's through my little, eventually troubled mother, but my stepmother. My name is Walter Milton Myers, and I was raised by the Dean family. I was given away as a baby, apparently. Why? I was such a cute little kid. I don't know why I was given away. But I had this woman who read with me, and she read true romance magazines. Her reading was not good, never was good, but I don't think I liked those stories. I didn't understand those stories, but I liked being there with Mama. You know, she was the only Mama I knew. So, long story short, I write anything. I have no very little shame. If anything that interests me, I'll write about. Most stuff I write about from my own experiences or background. I'm seeing these kids, and they have such a small store of information. All this information out there. You know, a friend of mine was going to take some kids from Jersey City to New York, which is 35 minutes to Midtown New York. And they said, are you going to bring buses? Give us buses to take us? And how do we get there? Kids just don't know anything. And, they don't have the kinds of information They don't have to do shopping. The parents can't do shopping. You know, I do the cooking at home, and I go to the supermarket and see what these people are buying. They're buying garbage, you know, buying garbage for breakfast, garbage for lunch, you know. People buying, what's this, mac and cheese, ready-made mac and cheese. You can't do better than that, you know, for the money you're paying. Anyway, so I decided to do a book about behavior. What do you do? How do you behave in this world? And I mentioned that to someone, and she said to me, start with the social contract. And so I did a book on the social contract. And it's called All the Right Stuff. And the big thing with the social contract is that you have to engage it. You have to engage it. You can say what you want to say. You can denigrate it, but it's going to be there. People are going to expect certain kinds of behavior from you. That's it, and you have to deal with it. And I know that some people are going to say, well, you know, I don't think this is that inner city kids, urban kids are going to take this. I think they're eager for stuff, and that they will take it. I write every day, not every day, 5 days a week, usually. Anything that interests me. I want to attract the 2 million kids in America living at or beneath the poverty line, 2 million. And those kids who are in group homes are not counted among those kids. There were 100,000 kids incarcerated. 100,000. You know, we've had some good news in that they can no longer, I think, kids under 16, they can't give life without the possibility of parole. But when I go to the prisons, which I do a lot, those kids are in jail, many of them arbitrarily. I spoke to a guy who used to play for the Minnesota Vikings. Big guy. He's a judge, and you know he was saying, you know, I think it was Tim McIntyre, big man. He played for University of Tennessee, but he was saying that he would like to give a kid a break at times. You know, he said, here's a kid. He's done something bad. He's been arrested, and now he comes before the judge. He says, I can't tell him just to go home, don't do it again. I have to have some kind of support from the house, and sometimes kids' parents won't even show up to take them home. It's really a shame, and that has to do with the way the world is shifting as far as economics. We're in. I always tell kids this story. When I was a kid, we used to play in the street all day, you know, and about 5 o'clock, between 5 and 5:30, you could see that all the parents would are coming home. And in my apartment building, there were 15 families. It was a 5-story building, 15 families. One family, the father was a postal worker. Everybody else worked either in a factory or in a service job. Now, today, those jobs don't exist. Those jobs don't exist. They just don't exist anymore. I was reading a thing in economics, in economics magazine, saying this guy was envisioning the future world. He says there was a huge building, and in the building there were 100 computers, and each computer had a different function. One computer regulated all the traffic, air traffic on the East Coast. One designed tools for aerospace. One designed curricula for that. Each one did something very special. And there were only 2 living beings in this whole building. There was a man and a monkey with a baseball bat. And it was the man's job to come in every day and feed the monkey. And it was the monkey's job to keep the man away from the computers. And it's a sad story, but much of what we're doing is headed in that direction. So, I think kids will understand that kind of thing. And I think that we have to approach it. So All the Right Stuff deals with that. With Monster, I was at a trial. I go to trials because I'm interested in that justice system. I go to trials. I was sitting about this time of day in a trial. There was the defendant, his lawyer, his two lawyers, and the two assistant DAs on the other side, the judge, the jury, and three spectators. I was one of them. And right in the middle of this trial, we heard all this cheering and what have you. So what's going on? And the judge said, "Oh, they're just letting school out. Close the windows." And the young man that was on trial was, I think, was 18, and he might have gone to the school across the street. And it was such a sad, sad moment for me. And from that, Monster came. In Monster, there's straight dialogue, and there's like a play, film version of the. When I spoke to prisoners, very often they would separate themselves from the crimes by changing person. One guy I was speaking to, he lived in the South Bronx, and he played saxophone. He used to play a little basketball, and he was saying, Mr. Myers, in many ways I'm just like you. So, yeah, but we were in Greenhaven, my man. So he's not just like me. I said, well, how did you end up in Greenhaven? He says, well, there was a holdup on 9th Avenue and 31st Street, and 41st Street. 9th Avenue in the afternoon, and there was some shooting, and there was an armored car robbery, and there were 2 people who were killed. So he's in the third person. I'm saying, well, did you happen to be walking by or something? He said, no, I did the shooting. No. But he switched to from first person to third person. So I pointed that out to my wife, and she says, go back over your tapes. They do that often. And I did. And so in this book, Monster, when he's talking about himself and how he feels, he talks to first person. He talks about anything about the crime. It's third person. And that's about what I do. You have any questions you'd like to ask me? A little? No, why? You got a question. I was thinking of asking him, but that's too personal. I want to ask him that. I ask.
One of the books on my son's summer reading list was Sunrise Over Fallujah.
Right.
And we listened to that on the way to vacation. He was in high school. What was your reason for writing that? How did you?
I dropped out of school the last time at 16, and I joined the Army, and I went to Vietnam. I joined during the Vietnam War. My brother, one of my brothers, joined the Army also, looking up to me. And he went to Vietnam, and he was killed the very first day he arrived. They sent him out on on the patrol to acclimate him to the company. He was killed. And I wrote Fallen Angels, put that one. My son, one of my sons went to Iraq. And I remember when he went, somebody on television saying that someone was killed, and you have this this premonition that something was going to happen. Well, if you have a loved one in a war zone, you have the premonition every day, every minute, you know. And I was so concerned about him being over there since his uncle was killed, another brother was killed. So I'm saying, you know, how am I going to deal with that? And because he's a chaplain, and they gave him a bodyguard, a lady bodyguard, you know. So I said, he doesn't carry a gun. So I asked him, I said, you know, you got a lady bodyguard? You know? He says, yes, she has a big gun and a bigger attitude. Really? I said, oh. But it was really scary. And they were killing anybody over there. And so he became a trauma counselor, you know. And, he was telling me about the traumas that some of these guys were suffering. And it was, you know, the level of tension from these IEDs, it was just unbelievable. You know, you could pick up something and just be dead instantly. So I had to learn about IEDs. So I wrote a way to the American Blasting Corporation, you know, what have you, and I had to buy a manual on how to make IEDs. So my wife said, then I can send you a manual on how to make IEDs. And so they asked me what I wanted it for. I guess they looked me up and what have you. And one day, two civilians rang my bell. Says, "Are you Walter Dean Myers?" I said, "Yes." You know, here's your manual, and they gave it to me, and had every instructions how to make bombs, how to make, you know. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I still think they were FBI agents checking me out. But now I'm writing on the invasion of Normandy. You know, and my ideas about war are changing. There was these soldiers being tried for atrocities, and you see them in the papers every day. Why these people think it's great to shoot the pictures of these atrocities. But war's an atrocity. The whole idea of war is an atrocity. It's a controlled atrocity. I mean, you have people bombing cities to soften it up and killing civilians all the time. You know, for some reason we want to make it as if it's not like that. My son, the chaplain, is now retired from the Air Force, and he's going to become he's still a trauma counselor because he was so moved by what was going on. Wars are atrocities. So I'm trying to take this from the point of view of a young man who goes into war, but I'm trying to make him like an anti-hero. And so he sees American boys being sacrificed at a great rate, which they were, and German boys. You know, I interviewed Germans who were in the war at 15. I interviewed Germans who had no idea what they were going to do. They were rounded up and sent to the front, you know.
Your books are some of the most accessible books for our students. Our students are placed at our residential facility by the courts, and they always, the first book they mention when they say they've read any book, it's Monster. And the autobiography of Malcolm X is very popular when we start with our nonfiction unit. It sounds like you're doing more books that we'd be able to incorporate in an interdisciplinary way with social studies, because we use Fallen Angels and Sunset Over Fallujah, and now you're mentioning World War II. Would you
Yeah.
continue that?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of ideas, but the ideas mature. I'm doing a thing on girls basketball. I'm doing a book called The Invention of War. How, that if there is no war, we'll invent one. We will find some reason. And, the idea that the availability of weapons worldwide, I mean, it's like unbelievable. When I was coming up, right after the Civil War, we had a different economic picture. We didn't have cheap weapons and cheap good weapons. We didn't have those. One of the things that has changed drastically over the last 20 years, and it's going to get worse, that is the availability of drugs. Now, 25 years ago, when I was, not 25 years ago, 45 years ago, when I was playing with a little Cuban group, and the guys were using drugs, and they were mostly injecting the drugs just under the skin rather than into the veins. But then, because it was a longer high, and they thought that they were going to be safe, and then some of the guys would get into the veins. But the price of the drugs were like $20, $25 for a high. In the 80s, crack was like $5 a rock. $5? Do you realize that crack is cheaper than a pack of cigarettes? That's unbelievable. I mean, okay, I'll tell you how old I really am. I remember when you could go into a service station, put a quarter into a cigarette machine, and a pack of cigarettes would come out with 2 cents on the side of it. That was your change, your 2 cent change. But now cigarettes are $7.50 or $8, and crack is cheaper, and meth is cheaper, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse, and we're going to have a drug nation, and it's just going to get worse.
How do we motivate our high school students to read? Because with the younger ones, we could read to them, but there is such a problem. After the assembly today, I had a class and I was talking to my students. A few of them said, it's too far gone. I don't like to read, I won't read. How do you really engage them and have them start reading?
Okay, so
That's a big problem.
Right, what I'm saying to them is that, and this is my theme for the 2 years, the reading is not optional. They are saying that it's optional, that if they don't read, it's no big deal. But what they're also saying is that they are not going to succeed. They are not going to. They have given up on themselves, and we have to convince them that they can succeed, and they don't believe it. If you have, again, my wife's not here. I'll talk about her. I have a wife who at one time was a very excellent painter, and she painted. She could sell some of her paintings. She did spot illustrations in books. Then along came the youngest boy, and she's teaching him art, and he got to be really good. So at 12, he's publishing. she stopped painting. And I'm saying, why? You're better than he is. Well, he's got 14 books that he's illustrated, and he's okay, you know, but she was better. The problem is she no longer believes that she is that good. So what are you going to do? If she doesn't believe it, she's not going to do it. And these teenage boys is the same thing. One of the things that I hope to do is to at least acknowledge their existence. So many books don't acknowledge their existence. People talk about diversity. I'm not either for or against diversity. I'm for inclusion. When I was a kid, I never found anything that I wanted in a book. Now, they never wrote about me. They never wrote about my neighborhood, or they still don't write about Harlem. Anything you read about Harlem is some, Harlem and jazz, ding, 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 you know, and you say, wait a minute, you know. But when I went to school, what they would have is, here come the slaves off the ship, you know, and then we had, what was the, George Washington Carver. Hated George Washington Carver? Well, George Washington had a big white horse. Robert E. Lee had a big white horse. George Washington Carver messed with peanuts. I said, come on, man. You know, now the books are somewhat different in that they have, here comes the slaves off the ship, dun, 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 dun. Then it's Rosa Parks. You know, it's slavery, then the civil rights movement. What happened in between? Nothing. Why would these people, if books are there to transmit values, and you're not in the books, that's saying something to you. They're saying you're not valuable. And so I find kids picking up my books, even if the book isn't that good, they pick the book up and they'll read it and say, it recognizes that I'm alive. So there's that and I want to get the dialogue going that if you're not going to read and be not just a get-by reader, but a competent reader, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. And we don't want to say that to kids. No, we don't want to say that to kids, but for whatever reason. But we are allowing that to happen. There's two crises going on. We were talking. One crisis is the idea of black men going to jail. That is going to be a national crisis because the amount of black men going to jail is something like between the ages of 25 and 34, now 25 and 43, about 65% have some jail experience, which means that somewhere along the line, they're going to be rejected for jobs, and they're going to be limited in their job acquisition. These guys are going to jail, maybe 3 months, 4 months, a year, the amount of guys going through the jail system, and that's going to put an economic burden on their families and their communities for decades. That's one thing. And the other thing is the lack of literacy. And it's also happening in London, in England. It's happening in England. And the British are handling it very badly. They're talking about allowing kids to take vocational tracks at 14. So here's a kid that's going to take a vocational track at 14, but you don't even know if that job is going to exist in 5 years. They're also talking about dropping the A-levels, and the A-levels are the regents, equivalent to our regents. And so they're saying you can get education to the elite few. When they had I was in London, I'm in London every year. I spend 5 weeks a year in London. And they had the riots in London, in North London. Of course in North London. North London is where the council housing is, the projects in North London. You go to North London and you see, I mean, it's like row after row of this council housing. They call it council housing. And in those houses, up to 75% of the people are on some sort of welfare. Underemployed for years, multi-generational. And it's very, very, very difficult. And you know, we're not talking about it for a number of reasons, because there are no easy answers, number one, and nobody wants to be looked at as oh, you're down on the poor, or you're down on minorities. Everybody's so shy of that. I'm not, because I was born poor, and I'm definitely a minority. Rather attractive, but.
I feel, well, in this particular school system, we live in a county called Columbia County, and there's all different economic levels. And particularly here, there are very few minority teachers. And I'm on various committees and all that, and I'm always talking about it, and it gets sort of pushed aside. And we have one community college here, and then there is no four-year college close by.
Right.
So, you know, the powers that be say, well, minorities, you know, don't go to college to learn. And I feel it's such a problem not having minority teachers for these minority kids to look up to. And they could be their role models. And I'm so frustrated because I feel no one listens to me. And do you think it's important?
I think it is. I think it is important. You know, one of the things I was telling my son, that when we lived in a segregated neighborhood, and Harlem was segregated, you know, and it was really segregated when I was young. You had black doctors, black lawyers, black teachers living in the black neighborhood. Because they couldn't move out, you know? And it was those doctors and lawyers who lived there who kept the neighborhood up. They were the ones who would call City Hall and complain. They were the ones who got the mayors moving. And they were the ones who kept the schools up. The schools were in excellent condition because the black professionals who were stuck there. Now, in the beginning of the 60s, you had all the black, the 60s in New York City was the area of integration. And all the blacks with money moved out. And they were moving out. And who did they leave back but the lowest economic groups? All of a sudden you saw the garbage not being collected, crack was all over the place, it was horrendous. Now Harlem is being gentrified, they say. So many of those the brownstone my brother lived in had 4 stories and I think 5 or 6 families. Now it's a one family lives there. You know, they sold it for $1 million, $1 million something dollars. They tore down my church. They tore, well, they had let it go into repair, but Church of the Master, Presbyterian Church, on 122nd Street and Morningside Avenue. They tore it down and put up a high-rise owned by the church. See, Presbyterians are going downhill too. But they tore down my church. Well, okay, that's you know, personal. But and they built a high-rise. I was so annoyed. Yeah, I would like to see, because black teachers are making a difference.
Yes.
And what, for one thing, they're doing, they are asking for more inclusive books in schools across the country. According to Dick Robinson of Scholastic, 43% of the school population is minority in America, 43%. And that's an awful lot. You go to a city like Dallas, Texas, you have 70%, I think it was 70, around 68% white and 32% minority in the population, but the schools were just the opposite. Because you go to Dallas, and all the white kids, there's more than $1.50 in their pocket, are going to private schools, religious schools, and what have you. And this is all over the country. So it's I don't know how we're going to solve it. I see with the economy, you're going to have fewer and fewer minorities going to. We're going to be like England. You go to England and you go to whether Blackstone's or it's Foyle's bookstore, and you look for any books which has minority peoples in it, you're not going to find them.
I must say, I introduced Ben Carson's book, Gifted Hands,
Right.
to my students, and they were amazed. They're like, is he alive? Is this for real? And so it is, I find it also very important. I'm the only African-American teacher in the high school, and I go to different classrooms, and even for Black History Month, not one mention or a project. So it's very important that our kids see and embrace their heritage. For the first year here, they say, you're not a teacher, because they didn't expect a Black person to be a teacher. Well, you're an aide. I said, well, I'm a well-paid aide. It's okay.
Right.
So until now, they come to me like today, and I always give them props. Today, one of the students, he's telling his friend, she believes in me. She believes in me, because I said, take the hat off. You have a lot on your shoulder. I'm depending on you. So I'm really, giving him the props, and he's pull himself up. He says, she believes in me. This is my friend. She believes in me. So
Right.
I think it's important.
It's important, but the way we teach history is just bad. And that's I accept some responsibility for that. The way we teach history is bad. I did a workshop in Jersey City with middle school kids, a writing workshop, which I loved. I love that. It was so much fun with these kids. But they were writing some negative things, racial things, and I asked them to bring in photographs of their grandparents. Unfortunately, the grandparents were like 30. So I began collecting old photographs, and I now have 10,000 old photographs, which is a lot of photographs, which is why my house is being redone. But, and I keep learning from those photographs. So I'm collecting photographs of Black workers, for example, to show these kids. I was in an antique shop. I love antique shops. And a guy came up to me and said, are you the guy that collects old photographs? And I said, yes, I am. That's me. He says, I have some. His uncle fought in the Italian-Ethiopian War. And I said, what was that? Just prior to World War II, there was a Italy was going to invade Ethiopia. And everybody knew that. And the UN was trying, not the UN, the League of Nations were trying to avoid dealing with it. Who was it? Sylvia Pankhurst was on the other side. But, so what they said the Haile Selassie, who was very young at the time, decided to get some pilots and some planes, but he had no one to fly the planes. So he could buy about a half a dozen planes, or maybe a dozen planes. And he sent his emissary to the U.S. for pilots. And there were enough African American pilots in the U.S. to go back and train the Ethiopians. So I didn't know any of that, you know. So I began looking at these pilots that were being trained. There were male and female pilots. And the female pilots, this is such a good story. Most of them were beauty shop owners. They owned beauty shops, nail salons. They were business women who could buy their own airplanes. And of course the guys says, oh, she's got an airplane? I'm definitely interested. No. And so, but the women bought most of the planes, the men went, and so I got pictures of this guy's uncle, maybe 100 pictures. I read his flight logs and what have you. And so what I have to do with that, I took it to my publisher. She said, So what I have to do with that is use something modern and I'm going to give the pictures to my wife, who's going to Photoshop them into cartoon type characters, but not completely cartoony, but you know, to enliven the books. And we need to have black history, but as integrated history. And if we can integrate it properly, we can do it. But we have to integrate it properly.
Well, I used your book Riot, and I taught the craft riots through the book. And I didn't learn about it when I was in school. And did you use some of your photographs in that book?
Yeah.
The old photographs that you collect?
Right.
The kids did great with it. I work at the same school as Laura. I work at this facility that is for adjudicated youth and placed
Right.
youth. And we got into some really good discussions about race and how these people were all living together in this neighborhood. And a lot of the kids had seen the movie Gangs of New York.
Right.
So they were very interested in it. And I didn't use the whole thing because, and when you were talking about how to get them interested, I take small parts. I give them this section, this section, this section, and that way it's something they can accomplish in a class period, and they could say, I participated, I did the reading. I've used a lot of your books. I did one-on-one with Bad Boy, the
Okay.
memoirs. And I was crying at one point, and this kid's looking at me. You know, it just resonated with me so much, especially the part where the teacher learned about you. You hated this teacher, or you thought she hated you, but then she realized you were a reader and she gave you the fairy tale book.
Right.
And I'm looking at this boy, you know, Azrael. Think about this, okay? Here's Azrael looking at me like, and I'm saying, look at this, you can always learn. I said, through a book, you can learn about other people, and you can always make a change. And I was just, like I said, I was in tears. I was so happy that, you know, I was able to get so much out of this book.
And doing the research for that book was so fascinating to me because I did a lot of the research. I wanted to know where the Irish came from. So we were in London, and we did the research on the Irish. And that was, so many of them prior to the Revolutionary War were shipped over as punishment. And so we found a listing of all the Irish women that were shipped over. And they were shipped over, the Irish women, before the Irish men. You know? And so they would catch, some poor woman stole a handkerchief. And she was sentenced to 7 years of banishment, which meant she was banished forever because, you know, and so but when she's sent to America for 7 years, she had to, number one, petition, she had a child, petition to have her child sent with her. The government would pay for the child's passage. Now, when she got to America, she owed the passage money, right? So then she had to work that off. There was even a time when they would send the women over, sort of semi-indenture them for a period of thing, and then marry them off to black men, so that the children would be slaves. So I'm reading these lists of petitions for people who have been sentenced for banishment, either to, well, prior to the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, to America, then afterwards to Australia and New South Wales, I think. They were sent over for 7 years, which meant forever, and they were petitioning to have a wife to go with them, or boy, that kind of, will the government pay for the boy? And if the government paid for the boy, sometimes the boy would not have to be indentured. But it was really like if you do the research, it's fascinating.
I hate to bring this to an end, but I...
Don't.
Okay, you can.
Well, thank you. And what I'm going to be trying to do over the next year and a half now is to address some of the questions that you've raised. Trying to get people to teach reading to read to children, and I'm going to be trying to get mentors reading with teenagers. There are hundreds of organizations which have a mentoring arm, but which are not really mentoring. What they will do is they'll buy books and send the purchased books. But this is my last story, promise for the day. I was invited to a national conference in New Orleans, and they had this gala, a huge gala, and then they had a book strand, and I was very excited. The gala had 3 caterers, one for Cajun cooking, one for Southern soul food, and one for, I think, desserts. They had 3 bars, right? Lots of money. Money, you could go into this place and you could actually smell the money. You could smell the money. And the book strand was one small table. And these people had a mentoring arm. And I said, how are you mentoring the kids for reading? And they said, well, we always tell them, go read. And these were well-meaning people. Thank you.